Is White's right? Is the core mystical experience the same in all religions? I reported back that Watts was wrong, because in the books I found, the Christians had a different view. On the other hand, these many Eastern mystics experienced oneness, a oneness in which all human identity and separateness was dissolved. Sadly, no advisor led me to Meister Eckhart, or to the Cloud of Unknowing, or to Jakob Böhme, whose work inspired psychiatrist Carl Jung. I now realize I gave Northrop the wrong answer. But what is the right answer? Obviously, the creeds of Christians differ from the multi-beliefs of Hindus. Wilfred Cantwell Smith sought to answer the question. He was asked to bring other religions to a radio audience. His radio talks were recently republished with the title Patterns of Faith in the World's Religions by the same publisher that's put out Marcus's book. He opens the book by speaking of the multi-faith experience teaching in Lahore. Then he focuses on an aspect of transcendence in each of 6 religions. For the Hindu, it is the phrase, "Thou art that," Tat Samasi. The individual self is the world soul. For the Muslims, there is no God but God. Smith says, as one gets closer to the truth, as one gets closer to God, God is one. He is majestic, mighty, awesome, merciful, and many other things, but above all, he is one. Every other sin may be forgiven, but not the failure to recognize the final truth and power of the universe is one. The oneness of the holy, the transcendent, the truth, which we can experience, but never catch in a bottle. At the end of the lectures in the book, Smith talks of the Christian in a religiously plural world. How do we respond to religious pluralism? For an analogy, he tells us that before Isaac Newton, it was thought that we lived in a dichotomous universe on Earth. Things fell to the ground here on Earth, but in the sky things went round in circles, and there was no connection between the two realities. Newton recognized that the fall of the apple and the rotation of the moon are governed by the same force. In the religious field, the dichotomy has been such that each group sees its tradition as faith and sees the other faiths as superstition. So Christians see their faith from God, and they see other faiths as purely human invention. Smith writes, certain Christians have even made the rather vigorous assertion that the Christian faith is not one of the religions of the world. Many poo-poo such a claim as unacceptable. I, perhaps surprisingly, take it seriously indeed. I have discovered recently that the same applies to other traditions. Buddhists, Hindus, Muslims, or Andaman Islanders. Their faith is true, the other's superstition. Smith now opens the door to the great question of his books. Belief in history and belief and faith, the difference between them. The core of his argument is surprising to many. He points out that the word belief once meant to hold dear, to love, as it still does in the German beleben, or in the German version of Grieg's beautiful song, Ich liebe dich. But today, to believe in modern English means to hold an opinion, whether it be right or wrong. The Bible nowhere suggests that it is important to hold an opinion that God exists, whether that opinion be right or wrong. Belief in the modern meaning of the word is not in the Bible. Smith goes on to argue that no one should believe in God who has not personally encountered God. God is a personal experience of the holy. For Smith, faith is both a quality of human relationship and the relation to transcendence. He reminds us of the psychological truth that if no one has faith in a particular individual, no one has faith in me, it's difficult to live. I'm crippled in being a person. So Carl Jung wrote, individuation is impossible without community. Smith tells us, quote, of faith and trust. We all know pretty much what it means to trust a person and to be oneself trustworthy. I find it of interesting and in fact revealing that in Chinese as in Greek, the same word means both trusting and trustworthy. To be a person who trusts others and to be a person whom others may trust coincide. For Wilfred Cantwell Smith, faith as trust is one of the human virtues like courage and loyalty. Here he teaches the basic trust found between mother and infant. This is not just a human virtue. This week, I started to walk across the bridge over the little river Arun near my house. A mother duck was calling loudly. I looked down, and there was the mother duck on a ledge, and below her, 3 of her ducklings had floated down below a little waterfall, and she couldn't reach them. And she was quacking, and we wondered maybe she wanted to help, and one man went down to help, but she obviously thought he was coming down to grab her ducklings, so she led them on down the stream, leaving the 4 other ducklings up in the stream up above, frantically looking for Mama. I meditated on that sad tragedy as we hiked up the hill. Next day, I walked the river again and looked down, and there was the mother duck with 7 ducklings behind her. My golly, a good ending. Mother love. Faith as trust is a universal reality. From mother ducks to prime ministers, there is either trust or lack of trust. I wrote Cantwell Smith concerning my thesis on Pistology. This is part of his reply. I must thank you for your suggestion of Pistology. My new book is the first to have the word theology in the title, and I have a section within it commenting on the inappropriateness of that term. Smith is referring to his book, Towards a World Theology. In this book, he makes 2 major points. All religions are not the same, but there is a shared religious history of humankind in which exchanges between religions go on all the time. Second, to be Christian or Jewish or Buddhist or Muslim is to accept that tradition as being normative for your life. This does not mean treating other faith communities as wrong. Rather, it is the base from which you can take your place in the religious pluralism of the world. I close with words from another Harvard theologian, Harvey Cox. Cox gave the Young Husband Lecture for the WCF in 2005. As Cox came to a close, he challenged some of the new spiritual individualism. He quoted Harvard philosopher George Santayana, who wrote, "If you want to be religious, you must be religious in a particular tradition." Cox commented, "You can get generic drugs, but I don't think there will ever be a generic religion."